it's not. There we go. Sorry, I got two cameras sitting there. All right. Hey, everybody. This week we have a special guest, Ibra Taher from the Green Party, who's running for U.S. Senate up in Oregon. Again, thank you for taking the time for this interview.
No, thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your candidacy and then just a couple philosophies? I read a lot of your philosophies on the website, but maybe some really bigger ones for you that stand out for yourself, and then we can go from there.
Well, I started getting involved in politics just recently. The reason why I just joined politics because I saw some hope that I couldn't ever possibly see before. And I don't know if I'm still right or wrong here, but in the past 50 years, whenever there's like a movement to change something, it has failed. And the younger generations, I think, because of the internet and the truths, the flow of the information now has gained a lot of awareness that we didn't have before. So before getting involved in politics, my work was in just exclusively in philosophy. In philosophy, we examine like everything that is beyond what is talked about. So when scientists go and try to experiment something, we ask how this experiment would help. What kind of laws, are they logical or not? What does it mean for our worldviews in something like this? When we go to social science, we ask the same questions. So typically we ask about the value system behind everything. And one of the things when we look at the society, one of the things that it is most neglected, but at the same time, the most influential things is the value system that we have. Joining this with politics, if you see, why do we want a healthcare for all? Why? Because there's a value governs this idea, leads us to believe in this idea that we should do something. So in philosophy, we talk about this value system, and I think it's not hidden that since the 1950s, the value system here in the country shifted from semi-religious, traditional to something else. You could see some manifestation from the civil rights movement and something like this. So this shift, we didn't know how to deal with it because in the past we had a value system, not challenged. Everyone knows it. And then there's something else started to happen, which is still a lot of philosophers try to figure it out. That's why some people started talking about utilitarianism, which is if there's a profit, then it must be ethical. Or maybe our ethics, all of our ethics should be pertain to our profits. We should eliminate this word. And what is happening here, the fight between the left and right, it manifests in Democrats, Republicans. It's not about this value system. It's not about what we had before and what we're gonna have now. It's about something else, which is mainly led by a for-profit ideology that we have, which is very hard to penetrate. A lot of reformers tried and failed. I think now we have some chances that we didn't have before. This is why I got involved in politics. And I chose the Pacific Green Party because it is the most party that is still not corrupt. Still not corrupt. It is the anti-war party. And many other things in their platform. But this is like the general idea where I came from, and why I got involved in politics. Because now I think we can make a change.
So then I would say that listening to that is that the core of everything is the corruption of money in our politics.
Well, greed is a trait of human beings.
Sure.
So greed is can be damaging power, and it is one of them. Sometimes the greed can be unleashed and cause a lot of problems. Sometimes what we call it reputation, the thirst for reputation. Sometimes people only wants to be under the spot, talked about, and they're willing to do a lot of things to keep that spot for them. So it is one of them, the for-profit ideology. It's one motivation for a lot of corruption, but it is one of them only. We have a lot. And you could see sometimes a lot of billionaires, they don't care about money, but they care about reputation. So they're willing to lose some money to gain some reputation. You could see it. I don't want to name names. We just had one recently, right? A few months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then about your run, it kind of stems from this idea of reputation and money. With your running as a Green Party, going against someone like the incumbent Merkley, Jeff Merkley, how do you overcome that reputation starting from ground zero?
Well, when we look at Oregon is one of the most progressive states in the country. This is a hugely distinguished in the past 5 years, I think. It is very progressive state. And one of the things that we started seeing here in Oregon, that we started hating everyone who takes money from corporations. And this is a good thing. And the discussion about money in politics almost exclusively directed to the PACs that gets money from corporations. I went far away from this and talked about it. We can go to it later. But anyhow, now in the new normal of the media, you could see how the media is shifted from the cable TVs to the internet. And this is one of the things that I was mainly focusing on campaigning from the beginning, is to get online, to get more publicity on social media. This is one of the things that I started to do 9 months ago. 9 months ago, and still working on it and growing it. And the other thing, the reputation. So everyone liked the Greens, but rarely anyone would vote to them, or maybe support them or volunteer to them. But people are changing now. I don't know if you're aware of some statistic came out just last year. The majority of the people, they don't identify themselves neither like Republican or Democrats,
right,
for the first time in some decades. So it happened just like recently. I think 60% of the people, they called themselves independent.
Right.
This didn't happen before. And this is one of the things that probably I touched on when I said there's something different going on these years. The public awareness is shifting now about our politics.
Agreed.
So I'm gonna try. If this question is about how you gonna overcome it, I'm gonna scream. I'm gonna tell everyone. Usually, when you see debates between people, politicians, they hold a lot of information because most of the time they are complicit in these information they don't want people to talk about. So one of the things I think that you've read about me is my stances on foreign policy. You could rarely see anyone, whether Democrat or Republican, go after the other opponent. I'm talking about foreign policy. You want to ask why? Because all of them complicit in the same violations. But for me, it is easy for me to point out because I'm not complicit and I don't encourage it. Actually, one of the reasons that justifies this run for me, taking time for my family. I have kids, 3 kids. Taking this time and instead of building my own future and research, like enjoying this life, dedicating my life to this campaign that is really hard mission, not an easy one. Sure. One of the things that motivated me for all of this is the foreign policy. Nobody cares about it at all. Just 2 days ago, Saudis bombed a port for coronavirus, like treatment center or something, with our weapons, with our support. When I say with our, it means the U.S. sold them. Our government supported them. They didn't stop them. The whole Congress didn't stop them. Just 2 days ago. Last week, we drone strike something in Somalia. Somalia, that country that nobody knows about it. Now we know about it because we have Ilhan Omar. She's from Somalia. But even Ilhan Omar, she didn't talk about it.
Right.
It is her home country. She was born there, but she didn't talk about it. We drone strike them. And with the international law, this is a violation. But nobody's talking about it. So this was like one of the reasons that motivated me to run. And one of the reasons I think that I'm going to be able to talk about a lot of issues without any limitation. And that should resonate with people.
You're right. There's so much about foreign policy that no one pays attention to. And when you have a murderous country, in my opinion, of Saudi Arabia, and we consider them friends, and they constantly do horrible things to people, and we ignore it, but then we condemn places like Iran when we've devastated that country for our gain. So it is foreign policy is should be a thing that's more popular with the American public, but most people don't pay attention to that thing, in my opinion. So I agree.
Well, let me add something here. Did you know 56% of our tax dollars goes directly to the foreign policy Pentagon? 56%.
That's insane.
56%. 4 years ago, they wanted to audit the Pentagon to see like the transactions within 15 years period. They couldn't locate 21 trillions. They couldn't locate them. So they said, we don't know. We just spent them. We don't know where it went. So this is one of the things that it is ignored. We should talk about it more often because it involved killing people, violating the human rights, not just international law. So international law here is built on human rights.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we ignore, stuff from like the caravans that were coming up from, South America. There's a reason why those people are coming up, and most of it's our cause.
Yeah. So immigration issue, you can't like separate it from our foreign policy. If I can just go back, Nicaragua, El Salvador, in 2009, Honduras. So all of these countries now create these waves of immigrants, and nobody's talking about it. So the politicians, especially from the Democrats, they go and talk about how horrible the conditions that they live in their countries, and we must help, right? But they don't talk about who led these horrible conditions to exist.
And who caused them?
Who caused them?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you totally. I wish I knew more about foreign policy. Of course, I've only seen some of the stories over the years, which are horrible stories. So I would love to talk further on that. I am getting questions in chat though, if you don't mind me, kind of
sure.
Before we get too far away from it. One was obviously, since you're a Green Party, you can look at the Democratic Party from the outside. And as you stated, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have a lot of similarities. However, the Democratic Party is much more, or at least in a lot of people's views, a lot more socially conscious versus conservative. And one question was, you looking from the outside, do you feel that the Democratic Party can be reformed and then maybe even eventually get rid of the corruption so that I'm assuming so we could go back or strengthen a two-party system, since unfortunately, and you did mention that we are changing, but right now we are still sitting in a two-party system. Do you think that corruption can go away, and can it be reformed?
Well, one of the things that a lot of people seem to be not aware of is the political party of the duopoly that we have. I always call it duopoly because let me give you an example. If you have two famous basketball teams, so every year you have these teams coming down together to first and second place, and you condition those fans that only these two teams worth of support and like watching and something like this. And then whenever you have a new strategy that you want to apply it, that you want to pass it, you give it to one of the teams. And then the fans of the other teams, the other team would keep just projecting that strategies because it came from the team that they want to defeat, right?
Right.
So this duopoly of team spirit, if you look at it, it just helps prolongs the corruption of the political establishment, and people doesn't see it through this because most of the time they are like the victims. They are the fans that they want their team to win no matter what.
Right.
And you can see it now. One of the issues that affected the primary within the Democrats is defeating Trump. If you can remember, like starting from 2 years ago, Democrats made Trump as number one issue that needs to be defeated, and this happens every election cycle. From the past 20 years, you can see it every time. This is the worst president ever, and we need to get rid of it. And this talking point comes from Democrats and Republicans. And every time it works. It works. And nobody's seeing through it. So when you talk about reforming this body, I don't know like how many people tried. And all of them failed. And even some people, when they try, when they have the good intentions and they join one of these parties, they change because now they need to live the team spirit. Now I have a team, not a good team, but I have a team, and there's an opponent that I need to play against. And you can see it from a lot of progressive people now, a lot of progressive people.
Right.
I would like to mention, just now ask AOC, she's the most progressive congresswoman, right, of all times. Go ask her about the USMCA, which is the new NAFTA, which is shipping jobs overseas, which is monopolizing industries. These are horrible things, very horrible things. She voted against it, but can you ask her what happened exactly? How did that pass? Because Pelosi, at the beginning of it, she rejected it. Then money started pouring into the Congress. She changed her mind along with the majority of her party. So something happened, and this led to the passing of this bill. So this is the major thing. Something changed, then the disastrous bill has passed. If you go ask AOC about it, what would she say?
Right.
Nothing.
Well, I mean, just not too long ago, AOC praised Pelosi. I mean, on The View.
And if you remember, the stimulus bill, just like 4 weeks ago,
yes,
every single member in the Congress voted for it. But some people, they have progressive constituents. They said, we didn't like everything in the bill, but we needed to vote for it. And this is good for every bill that you want to trick your people that you are against it, but you want to pass it. And they're using it every time. So this thing that should not be underestimated when you join a party that is highly corrupted. The corruption is organized. This is ironic. The corruption is organized there, and you go there and trying to reform them. And meanwhile, you make friends, you make connections, you soften your advocacy, and you become at least one of the team.
Right.
And this is what is happening.
Absolutely, that makes total sense. I mean, just after a matter of time. I mean, how much fight can you put in when you're talking to a brick wall, right? Like, so. So let's talk a little bit closer to you and the people you're running against. As I mentioned earlier, Jeff Merkley is the incumbent. I noticed that there was about 4 Republicans who haven't had their primary yet, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any polls on which Republican might get who's favored out of the 4? Have you looked into that?
Well, I talked to one of them before. His name is Paul Romero. So
and
he's a male,
right?
And he's a veteran and a male, and I think he'll get it, the nomination. But yeah, he's just a team member.
Gotcha.
And that team is not We the People team.
Right. I mean, is he a big Trump supporter? Is he back?
Well, that's all Republicans. Now, go ask any Democrats if they oppose Pelosi or Chuck Schumer.
Right.
Chuck Schumer. What would they say?
Probably not. They want, yeah.
So can you imagine someone running for election and maybe trashing Trump? No, nobody would do it.
Fair enough.
Well, privately they would do that, but not publicly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what things do you stand? So let's just talk about you against Merkley, because as far as I know, Oregon is a blue state, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so then what is he running on, and you oppose directly between you and Merkley?
Well, I haven't seen his platform now, but what I've seen from him is he's just a standard Democrat. So about 90% of the time he would vote with them. Sometimes he has like a good superficial bills and advocacies. So sometimes he had something like this. But when you go to look at the major issues, something people need to understand when they talk about our politics. So we are controlled by the 1%, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we call them the ruling class. Sometimes we call them the billionaires. Those 1%, they have two fronts that they can benefit from. One of them is locally, and the other one is internationally. You could see its reflection on foreign policy. Our foreign policy is just like opening the market, stealing some natural resources, and opening new markets for those 1%. And locally, they want to control the public so they can continue doing what they're doing. So these are the major issues in politics that leads to the corruption of our political machine. Those are the main things. And when you look at every politician, you could see rarely anyone would talk about them, these political machines. So they would talk about some minor issues that would have like a good media. People would like him, would like these politicians for these advocacies, but nobody would touch the core things. And this is what happened here with Merkley and everyone else, or most of them at least. So he's not unique in this aspect. So our main domestic issues here is the control of these 1%, which is the money in politics, one aspect of it. The revolving door, we call it revolving door, when politicians, after they're done with the political life, they go and work for another lobbying industry or something like this. And we'd see the ties to the stock market and a lot of investment involved in politics. These are just some issues that he can talk about it and it make a difference, but nobody's doing that. And this is one of the things that Merkley is not talking about and not advocating for, not trying to reform. He talks about Citizens United, which is one aspect of money in politics. It is only one aspect. I compared the lobbying money between 2010, from before 2010 and after, which is the year the Citizens United was ruled out. So it was 2010. You won't see a lot of difference in spending.
Right.
Can you imagine that? But when you listen to the media, you would think that all of the corruption started in 2010 from Citizens United, but this is not the case. So Merkley talks about Citizens United sometimes, and that's it.
But ignores the whole bills in the 78 that passed, that actually caused.
Yeah, so he doesn't talk about a lot of other things. Why? Because he benefits from it, because his party benefits from it. When you talk about the economic system, our economy is highly concentrated. It's very concentrated. That's why we have 1% of the people owns maybe 50% of the wealth in the whole world, right? So the concentration of power and the economy has affected a lot of things. One of them, they can control our politics.
Right.
So this is a major issue. And when you look at the bills that allowed this to happen, you'd see 2008, 2009, the bailouts, some Wall Street regulations, and the NAFTA and the new NAFTA. So all these fronts, he has never touched them. Those are the major issues. If you want to see why do we have homelessness, one of the major issues is the economic system that we have requires pioneers for every job. And every job that requires pioneers, it means that you're going to export and import these pioneers, disregarding who needs them locally or not. or the money, can we use it locally or not to invest in our community and society? All of these issues related to the economic system that is concentrated and driven for the because of the profit that they can make, to maximize the profit. So where's politicians from this? Where's Merkley from this? I advocate for localizing businesses. It has a lot of social impact. And when I talk about social, I'm talking about relations between people, communities, not only economy. So this is one of the aspects that nobody's talking about it. Economy affects life. Politics control economy, and the economy affects lives.
Sure.
And this is one of the things that that requires everyone to dig deep before voting for a politician, because they can control every aspect of your life, your healthcare, your relations. This is very absent from the discussion. You know, a lot of these relations. Now you're married, right? Mm-hmm. And this relationship is impacted by the society that you live in, and this society is impacted by the justice system that you have and economic system that you have, and politicians control these systems.
Right.
These are big issues, and nobody's there.
Agreed. I agree. And so, actually, real quick, just because we were already talking about Merkley, I don't want to get too far away. Do you feel that the other senator, Ron Wyden, is about the same as Merkley? Would you?
Well, Wyden is. Well, let me tell you something. The difference between these standard politicians is not significant.
Sure.
So all of them are standard politicians, and there's like the leadership, Chuck Schumer, Pelosi, and those guys. So leadership and standard politicians. Most of them are the same. I think Ron Wyden, he has more involvement in the foreign policy, and especially with Palestinian rights. He's against them in a way, which is something I don't like. Well, Merkley is the same with the Palestinian issue. He takes money from some groups, Israeli groups, but Wyden is worse in that aspect.